We get started here on episode 14. We want to brief everyone and just say that we are talking about a very sensitive topic. We're going to be talking about some very sensitive content. And it has to do with Black History Month because February is Black History Month. And we just want to make sure everyone that listens or has viewed our podcast to in the past, we want to make sure you guys all understand that we are approaching this topic with the utmost respect to the African American culture. We are not experts on the history. We are not even going to come close to, relating to the suffering that has happened over America's history. So, with that being said, we just want to make sure everybody understands where we are coming from, but we actually have, apart from the history that is considered negative and just horrible, we actually have a pretty cool focus on today's show about the positive things that have come from the African American culture as a whole, and how America has massively just benefited from the contributions that have been made by African Americans to our culture and society. So,
with that, hey, it's Mike.
It's Todd.
And it's Evan, and welcome upstairs to another episode of the Third Floor Podcast. This is episode 14. As you all know by now, if you're still here, this is about Black History Month. So, that was a lot. You pretty much gave an intro.
Yeah.
It's a long-winded
Well,
disclaimer.
This is a very touchy subject, and we're three white guys talking about it. Yeah. But like Todd said, the whole point is just we want to be able to talk about serious topics on this podcast.
Of course.
And we would all regret, I think, not talking about Black History Month in the month of February.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, usually our topics have been pretty lighthearted. I mean, for heaven's sakes, we did a whole podcast or half of a podcast dedicated to dumb laws.
Right.
So this, while it only being our 14th episode, is easily our most serious one, I would say.
Absolutely.
Now, I can speak for myself, and I think I speak for Michael and Todd as well. You know, you see three white dudes up here. We've never faced any type of racial suppression in our life.
No.
We're not trying to brag about it, but that's what makes it challenging for us when we talk about Black History Month, because we think of names like Martin Luther King Jr., Jackie Robinson, maybe a name like Malcolm X, like Rosa Parks. Those are the names we learn about in school, that we hear about. And we know there's a lot to Black history, that we may not know, that we were not taught in schools because our school systems, they just decided to ignore it. So it's going to be a little heavy. We're going to try to be a little positive too. So we're not trying to offend anybody. If we do, we apologize. That's not our intention. But, we're learning like a lot of white Americans are still learning. We kind of want to focus on where we have come since roughly about the 1950s, 1960s, when the Civil Rights Movement was taking place, to where we are today, and how much further do we need to go.
Yeah.
So I didn't put this on the notes because I found it after you printed it out, Todd, but this is from the Pew Research Center in 2017. They conducted a survey. Said 40% of white Americans polled said race relations were good. Black Americans, 28% felt the same way.
Okay.
So obviously, I think you've got to look at it. If there's such a discrepancy there in the numbers, clearly something still needs to be done. And I think even then, when you say only 40% of white Americans think race relations are good, that's pretty telling, because that's still less than half of the white population that says race relations are good.
Yeah.
Well, America has a very ugly past, unfortunately. And if you look at where we're at today versus where we used to be, it's a lot different in a positive way.
Yeah.
But that does not mean that everything is rainbows and happiness. There's a lot of discrimination that still goes on today, and it's not only in the South.
No.
It's still
everywhere,
all over. So that's what we want to address. I mean, you put out the stat. I don't know, with everything that America has gone through in the past, I don't know if there is a point within a year, 5 years, 10 years where everything is going to level out.
Yeah.
I think that's something people need to work on every day, every week, and we need to not forget about this time period.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid point that people. I guess. Well, I'll back up to Evan's point. You know, we learn about all these key figures and key people in school, and that's very important. It's like those are, you know, history changing stories. Like, I mean, or not history changing. They're just history. Just that you can't overlook it. You can't bypass the story of Rosa Parks. The stories that come from the slavery the slavery timeline. There's so many horrible things that happened that white people will never understand, and it's grotesque. It's not something I'm proud of as an American who knows that that's the history. That's sad. That's so sad that humans treated each other that way. But like you were saying, like I don't know if there's ever going to be a point if we don't stop and we don't, you know, try to address the problems that are happening, not just in the South, not just in the North, just everywhere.
Right.
Globally, there's problems with racism. But you know, I think that's a very, very scary fact maybe not fact, but it's a scary thought. You know, what if we don't beat racism? And if that's a thought that you're okay with, like, I'm fine with not beating racism, that's not okay, period, in my book. Like, you should, as a decent human being, it doesn't matter what color of skin somebody has, you should be treating them like you want to be treated. That's how I was raised. That's how I've heard a lot of people were raised. I mean, I know for a fact you were raised like that. Tina would whoop your tail.
Well,
and then Dan would do round 2. But
and that's a good point. So, is racism taught?
That's interesting because that's what I was going to ask you. I believe it is a taught thing.
Yeah.
I believe that if you drop a baby off in the middle of nowhere and the first person he sees, regardless of the same skin color or not, he's going to interact with that person because that child, will say, has never seen, you know, they've never seen racism. I think it definitely is a taught thing.
Yeah,
I mean,
I agree.
That's
with
why
that.
you still see in 2019, you know, the neo-Nazis, the KKK, you see these because they're being taught, hey, black people are evil.
Yeah,
and that's just not the case.
It's taught hate. It's what it is.
Simply what it is. And no one's born racist. It's like the whole thing, like, you know, people want to make the claim that you're born that way. Like, no, you're not. No one's born a certain way. You're born with a certain skin color, and you're born as either a male or a female, and that's that.
And you're not born being able to choose your skin color, but you're born with the ability of how you treat other people.
Yeah. You get introduced into society. I was in a sociology class a couple months ago, and part of the focus of the class was understanding how people get acclimated to society. And so when you ask the question, is racism taught, I think, you know, you don't just learn to ride a bike overnight. You know, you typically learn to crawl before you walk, and you learn to walk before you start to jog, and you learn to jog before you run. And I think that's a positive example, because, you know, learning how to walk from a kid to an adult being able to run, that's great. That's like, you can take part in sports or whatever. When we flip it and apply it to the history of you know, the African American culture and what African Americans have been through, it's really terrible to like reflect on today's times. We're not even thinking about the history. Today's times, like Evan said, 2019, when kids are being brought up and they're seeing that white people are still treating African Americans in a way that is completely unacceptable.
Right.
Yeah, of course a young kid that's 4 or 5 years old that sees something terrible happen and then nothing gets done about it, like, and then they grow up and they get older and older and older. Of course it's an easy thing to teach whenever nobody wants to stand up to it,
Yep.
But-
We're all in agreement
Yeah.
that it's definitely a taught thing.
Yeah.
You're not born racist, although it's harder for others who are born in a household that has that idea.
Yeah.
Um,
But
But
you have
there's
to fight it.
yeah, you have to fight it.
Yeah.
So that we all know about the ugly past of America, going through
Yeah.
Jim Crow laws, post Civil War,
Yeah.
and basically just complete segregation of not treating people with human decency.
Yeah.
African Americans had a different doorway they had to walk through, different way they had to exit,
Different water fountains.
different water fountains. Reading up, I didn't know this, but they had a different Bible too.
Really?
If they were sentenced to court, they had to
Wow.
swear on a different Bible. Obviously, we've grown a lot as a country since that period of time.
Yeah.
But it's still, the mindset is still there in certain areas.
Yeah.
Speaking of Jim Crow laws and kind of tying it back, I'm sure most people know that Jackie Robinson broke baseball's color barrier in 1947, and obviously everyone knows about that. But what people oftentimes overlook, there are two places where spring training is held: Arizona and Florida. Back when Jackie Robinson was when he first came into the big leagues, the furthest west any team went was St. Louis. So you didn't have spring training out in Arizona yet. So all the teams usually would train in Florida. So Florida being in the South, Jim Crow laws. So like important players, and I'm naming off some of the greatest baseball players who's ever lived: Willie Mays, Hank Aaron, Ernie Banks, Bob Gibson. These guys couldn't stay with their white teammates during spring training. They would have to drive to like black hotels outside of where their team was staying at just so they could spend the night. They couldn't like eat with their teams. They couldn't ride the same bus just because of these Jim Crow laws. And it's really sad to think like, where did it become okay way back when it was like, okay, we can segregate against people because their skin color is different than us.
Right.
It
And
just-
the KKK was born in the Jim Crow era. So if you know anything about the KKK, it's a group of hate-filled people with nothing but disdain for a certain group just because of the color of their skin.
Yeah.
It's sad to know that African Americans at one point were forbidden to enter national parks.
Yeah.
Just basic rights taken away from people because of the color of their skin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it's just it's grotesque. It's just so sickening. But I think like you said a minute ago, everyone knows, to some extent, the horrible history.
Right. So in the dark period of America,
Yeah.
there were some really great leaders and people who paved the way for where we're at today.
Yeah. So I think like we said at the beginning of this, we want to call out the problems of racism and the history that is behind racism and the current events that are still going on that feed the negative machine, if you will, of racism. Excuse me, racism. But on like you said, Mike, on the flip side, we do want to honor those leaders that came out of just some horrible times.
So Evan was talking about Jackie Robinson. If
Jackie
we're talking
Robinson's
about
a great one.
sports,
Yeah.
there were a lot of leaders. You think of baseball and track and field were the two two big sports
Yeah.
to have the first emergence of African Americans,
Yeah.
where people could cheer them on, and it was a form of like being together.
Yeah.
So you had John Baxter Taylor in 1908. He was the first U.S. representative at the London Games to win a gold medal.
Wow.
Crazy. 1908. Vanetta Flowers for bobsledding. She was the first African American woman to win a gold medal in the Winter Olympics.
Wow.
2002.
Yeah, I remember
recent.
you mentioned that before the show.
Very
yeah.
recent.
Yeah.
You have people like Earl Lloyd, the first NBA player to appear in a game.
This is not necessarily sports, but it is really cool. I wish I could remember her name. I feel horrible for not remembering her name because she was so amazing. But I had the privilege and the honor of working an event last fall, I think it was. No, 2 falls ago. And I actually, like I said, I had the privilege and the honor of meeting the first African American woman to work for Marvel Comics.
Wow.
And that actually had something published by Marvel Comics. That was incredible. Her story was incredible. I wish I could remember her name. I'll have to look her up. But yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, that was it. I mean, the other one I had was Bill Russell. He's the first black NBA coach.
Yeah.
But
did you see 47? We keep talking about Jackie Robinson.
Yeah.
But did you see that movie?
Yeah.
I think it did a great job, like showing that time frame and then that time of his life.
Yeah.
But
did you see that movie, Evan?
42.
Or 42?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I said 1940. Or
You said 47.
Yeah. I was thinking of the year. But yeah, so apart from sports, I mean,
let's take it back to the beginning of Black history.
Yeah.
So Carter G. Woodson
Mhm.
launched a week dedicated in 1926 to African Americans. They chose the second week of February between the birthdays of Frederick Douglass and Abraham Lincoln. This turned into Black History Month.
Yeah.
From there, known for writing the contributions of Black Americans into the national spotlight, that's what Carter G. Woodson did. He played a huge role in the beginning of Black History Month.
Yeah.
What book did he write?
It's right there. Miseducation of the Negro.
Ah, okay.
1933. Yeah. And then, like, how would we even begin to approach, like, the amazing things that have come since then? You know, like Martin Luther King, obviously.
Right, his "I Have a Dream" speech.
You know, like, we could literally spend episode upon episode upon episode dissecting that speech. As many historians and people who literally study those works for a living, like, it would, you know, that there's no amount of words that can say or describe the amount of value that Dr. King brought to our
it's
nation.
up there with one of the most important speeches in American history.
Yeah, it's incredible.
I was listening to it at work.
You were texting us.
Probably not the right place to listen to it,
but like, yeah,
the way he's speaking on a subject, it's just incredible. It gives you chills.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm getting chills right now just like even thinking.
Yeah, the vocabulary he chooses and the way he delivers it would be impossible to think someone out there listening to that would fill them with rage.
Yeah.
Like, how can you listen to that?
Yeah.
And just not feel anything but hope and inspiration.
Yeah.
It's beyond me.
Absolutely. I think one of my favorite memories learning about Dr. King was there was I remember, I can't remember which grade it was in, but there was a really well put together animated film that it was like kind of like a cartoon kind of deal, but it was very well just orchestrated to teach his story in the elementary grades. I want to say it was maybe 5th or 6th grade that, like, I remember we had to, like, watch this video and do lessons and like write a paper and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean, his work is just, yeah, it'll leave you speechless, to say the least. But moving on, I think, you know, we have people like Morgan Freeman. Everybody knows who Morgan Freeman is.
Mm-hmm.
I
the,
wish
the face of God,
Yeah.
basically.
I wish that I could do his. What's a line that Morgan Freeman says? Because I love his voice, and I wish I could mimic his voice.
I don't think I could.
I can't even think of a
I
line.
mean,
right
I
now,
know
but-
I can't mimic his voice, but I know my favorite line from him, and it comes from Shawshank Redemption.
Oh yeah, I love this one. Go ahead.
I apologize if the distance is wrong, but it was like Andy crawled through a half mile of foul-smelling shit I can't even imagine.
I remember that. Yeah, that was a really good movie.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Morgan Freeman. He's a person in today's time that he speaks. It says here he speaks for Black History Month.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Read it again.
Where
He's a huge proponent of Black History Month, and he's a face for it, basically. You know, keeping it around, making sure.
Guys, read the line.
Why don't you just tell us?
There it is. Yeah, Black history is American history.
Yes.
He's been outspoken against it.
That should be a typo.
No, it's
Uh-oh.
So Morgan Freeman is not for.
not. He's not for Black History Month.
Okay, so
Because he believes it's American history.
Okay.
Is that's what the line.
Yeah.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
That was not a typo.
Gotcha.
Thanks.
I was reading that and I was like, wait a minute.
Thank you for messing up my hair.
It's a mullet. I did that
Yes.
for Kyle.
He'll see it
Anyways,
later.
Morgan Freeman, yeah, face of Black history, but at the same time, that line is, now that I read my notes properly, yeah, Black history is American history. It's
Mhm.
and it's never going away, you know. But one thing I think as we kind of get close to time here, we could go on and on and on,
Mhm.
right? About the terrible things that's happened. We could go on and on. You know, I would hope that we would be able to spend more of our efforts, not just us three, but as a nation, as a whole, celebrating the wins that we've had. Not, and by we, I mean as a nation.
Mhm.
But I think more importantly, as we come to a close here, I think, you know, you sent us a video, Mike,
Mhm.
and it was about the Charlottesville.
Yeah, Vice did a really
Yeah.
good documentary on the Charlottesville.
Yeah. So why don't you talk to us a little bit about that?
It was 2016 when they were talking about the removal of the Robert E. Lee statue in Emancipation Park,
Mm-hmm.
which is ironic in itself. But basically what happened is you had a group of white nationalists, neo-Nazis, come through, and although they should have the right to march, as they did, things got violent.
Yeah.
And it took a turn where it was no longer just a march of them, whether you agree with them or not, which we don't.
Yeah.
Everyone has the right and the freedom to march for what they believe in,
Mm-hmm.
as long as it's non-violent. The
Right.
problem is it turned violent.
Turned violent.
And you
very,
had
very badly.
you had a group of people who really did not believe that the statue should be there, especially in the area it was in,
Yeah.
with a person who fought basically against the rights that we have now.
Mm-hmm.
And the documentary just shows the leader, Christopher Cantwell, was one of the white nationalist leaders, and the man is just pure evil.
Yeah.
The way he talks about another race of people with no remorse for
He
anything
literally
that would
said
happen.
in the documentary, if we have to be violent with these people, we'll be, I think he was like, we'll be effing violent, and went off and just like,
Mhm.
was terrible. And then he even went to the furthest, like the most extreme point, like if we have to, his words were, if we have to kill these people, we'll effing kill them.
Yeah.
And that's ridiculous.
Right.
Like, and then you're talking about violence, like there was a it was a Charger, just the Dodge Charger just came flying down the street and just hit people.
Yeah, that's a terrifying video to watch.
Yeah, it's just
It's
horrific.
very hard to watch.
That
Yeah.
kid was from Ohio too.
Yeah,
Jesus.
the driver.
Yeah,
I did not know
I
that.
didn't know that. I didn't have a clue about that.
Yeah.
But anyways, why do we bring that up? Why do we talk about that video? Before the show, I was telling Mike and Evan, I watched this 20-something odd minute, documentary, and it just pissed me off. Like, it just, I was like ready, I was telling you guys, I was like ready to like fight. I was so mad. And it's so hard to put into words, but like, I think the point being, and what I'm trying to get at here is, we will never, ever, ever, ever overcome any kind of obstacle. Doesn't matter if it's racism, doesn't matter if it's financial problems, it doesn't matter. We will never learn to overcome things as a nation if we don't first learn to mesh. And we don't first learn to respect, and we don't first learn, more importantly than all that, love each other. It's like, what's this guy's name? Christopher Cantwell.
Cantwell.
can't roll do it.
Yeah.
He's a prime example of what not to be as a human being. You don't go around saying that you're just going to kill people because you're more of a nationalist. I think that's what he said he was. Like, this view that there's no room for other races. There's no room for any kind of, discrepancies or problems, in America. The truth of the matter is, America's always going to have problems.
Yeah. There's going to be people that disagree with you, and you're going to disagree with other people.
Yeah.
But you need to be able to find common ground, and you need to be able to understand that regardless of the color of your skin or what you believe in, we need to treat people with decency.
Yeah.
I think what has to be done is, if we truly want to get rid of the issue of racism in this country, we first have to acknowledge that it is an issue.
Absolutely.
And then we have to go out and treat others the way that we want to be treated.
You have to lead by example.
Doesn't matter if they have the same political affiliation as you. Doesn't matter if they have the same religious affiliation as you. You recognize, you say, hey, I understand you might be facing some issues that I'm not facing, but I'm not an enemy.
Yeah.
I want to treat you with respect because that's how I want to be treated. So I'm going to look at you the same way I look at anyone else.
Yeah. I think that's it. If we don't recognize that there's a problem, we'll never be able to fix it.
Right.
We're only putting a blindfold over ourselves every single time.
And I think one thing we didn't even touch on in this, Jim Crow laws, which were outlawed in 1965, fast forward 43 years later, 2008 presidential election, Barack Obama is the first African American to be elected into office.
Right.
I remember where I was when he was inaugurated.
Mm-hmm.
I was in the school library at Westerville North, and I watched Barack Obama be sworn into office.
Wow.
I was too young to vote at the time, didn't necessarily agree with Barack Obama politically, but respect him as a person, and I'm glad I got to see that moment.
Yeah, it changed American history. So I think we'd be curious to know what you guys think of this episode. Like we said at the very beginning, this is a very sensitive topic that we are trying to respect, and it can get very ugly very quick.
Mm-hmm.
But I think at the end of the day, we want to leave you guys with a message of just, if you see problems happening in your immediate friendships, in your immediate family, if you got to be able to stand up. And it's hard. It's so hard.
Mm-hmm.
Every single one of us, and us three, people I know, people I'm sure you guys know, it's hard to stand up to a tension-filled moment that, you know, involves racism.
Mm-hmm.
I can't say that I've been in a spot to do that, but at the same time, the bigger picture outside of me and outside of us as individuals is it's a nationwide, it's a global problem, and I don't think I don't think it's wrong to say that we have to bond. We have to come together. We have to learn to respect each other.
Mm-hmm.
Forget what color of skin the person is. Forget their, you know, their religious, like you said, the religious views, the political views. They're a human being, and you know they need to be treated, you know, like you want to be treated.
Right.
End of story.
End of story. Did you have anything else, Evan?
No, obviously there's a lot more we could talk about.
Sure.
but
Hard to fit it all in 30 minutes.
We're
Yeah.
trying to condense it down to as much as we can. So I would just encourage you, if you want to learn more, just read up on articles. There's a great article I read on the Smithsonian website. You know, just get out there. You know, educate yourself. That's all I can really say. You know, that's what we're going to continue to try to do as we move forward. But hopefully you enjoyed this episode. We're sorry that it was a little more somber than the previous ones we've had, but we want to make sure that, you know, we're also hitting on important subjects too. Next week, we will have our first official guest, Jordan Bell from the Columbus College of Art and Design is going to come in. He is a, can I say coworker?
Friend of mine.
Todd's, yes,
Yeah.
who hosts a podcast. So he's going to be on here. And we're just going to be asking him basically what it's like to have a successful podcast.
Yeah. His podcast title is First You Hustle. It is on a couple radio stations here in Columbus. So check him out. He will be live right here in this seat that is not present. It's in between me and Evan.
We might need a bigger table.
Well, Jordan might want to sit between you and Michael. I don't know. But yeah, we might need a bigger table. So yeah, Jordan's a great guy, very knowledgeable when it comes to what it takes to set up a podcast, properly talk about topics, organized topics, the equipment behind broadcasting. He's a very, very, very cool guy.
So basically,
we
we're
can't wait for you
going
to
to
meet him.
get like our own little like class
Yeah.
on the air.
Jordan's gonna take us to school, man.
That's right.
So we're looking forward to it.
Tune in February 25th. Make sure you're there for that. And in the meantime,
Last but not least, be sure to check out
Yes.
our new segment coming out.
yes,
We haven't decided a day yet, and we're going to release the name on the episode.
yeah,
So it's going to be 10 minutes. We've talked a lot about Columbus and wanting to focus on that. That's what
Yeah.
the episode is going to be about.
it's gonna be good.
So check it out.
So, all right, well, it's been fun. We're gonna hit the stop button right now.